are here with the IBASA EPI webinar. We're focusing on offering effective support for us as practitioners to understand better the traits and the preferences of our clients, the small business owners we work with. And we're very fortunate to have Lucille Greef in the room. Lucille has got decades of experience working with organizations and businesses and the people in it, mostly, understanding that. And I think I've learned a few things from you, Lucille. Looking forward to learn today too. We're going to do something interesting in that Thobeka Pozwa is normally co-host with me. He's going to do a role play with Lucille, and we're going to learn from that in the practice of understanding our traits, the traits and preferences of small business owners. So I'm looking forward to that, and perhaps we can get going by asking our audience in the room. We are filling up quite nicely now. A question or two. So if you're new to Zoom, you may see that there's a pop-up going to appear on your screen just now asking you a question. It's a poll, and I'm going to launch that now. So you should be able to vote. You'll have to vote for all three the items in that poll before you can submit it. But we've got 3 questions there. The first is, do you profile your clients to identify their traits and preferences? Like as you start with a client, do you ask them, go and do this online test perhaps, and then you get a report that gives you some feedback on their traits and preferences? Or do you have a discussion with them around that so that you can understand them better before you start or as you start? So that's the first question. The second question is, do you know any of these tools? 15 FQ, DISC or Insights, similar tools, the Enneagram, eScan, the Gallup Strengths Finder, maturity assessments, Myers-Briggs types, sort of those are that 16 types with the 4 letters each. The OPQ, which is quite an involved kind of proficiency test, and the vitality test. Do you know any of those? If there's other, you can type in the text chat, but otherwise you can vote for that. And then the third question is, do you use any of these tools? The same list there. So I see the voting is happening quite rapidly here. Please participate, because it also gives us, and specifically Lucille, indication of where people are at and what the kind of tools are that we know of and are using. So as it is going now, 50% of us in the room are not identifying traits and preferences as a way of starting off with our clients. And at the moment, there's only one person that does it all the time. I kind of like doing it too, if the time is there to. I can't say all the time, but I really prefer doing that. It's a really good conversation point to start off with. Two say all the time, and just about there's a bit split between sometimes and not at all. And then Myers-Briggs features quite well. There's quite a few that have others. So please type in the text chat if you are selecting others that you know of and that you are using. Quite a few of you. So if you battle to find the window, just look behind the windows on your screen, or if you're on your phone, just swipe once or twice and you may see the poll window there. We're going to close it soon, so you've got a few seconds left to do so. And then we're going to end the poll, and we can share the results with everyone too. And on that note, Lucille, if I can maybe bring you in.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Christoph.
Yeah, so this is interesting, eh?
Absolutely. And I think it's also part of kind of a trend that I see in different parts of the kind of advice and consulting field. So for example, in financial planning, a couple of years ago, people would never be thinking of traits and personality when they're giving people financial advice. They just want to know, what's your risk appetite? All of a sudden, this is something that's incredibly important in the world. And there's a whole movement towards getting to know our clients much better. So surely in the business advice field, this is something that's happening as well. And I'm happy to be speaking to everyone.
Great. So you can say a bit more, sort of about your own experience, sort of, we don't mind blowing our trumpets a bit more, sort of, but I got to know you about Enneagram and learning about kind of personality typing, and, sort of my understanding as a business support practitioner really kind of moved forward in understanding that clients show up in the world differently. So I'm not sure if you want to just say something, Lucille, about what you're doing now and in the past, sort of that is of interest to note.
Absolutely. So thanks for that, Christoph. So in terms of my background, I've been a practitioner and a consultant for my entire professional career. But my specific interest has always been in figuring out, how do we measure things accurately? How do we make it easier to figure out, for example, the human condition or the culture of an organization, or what's happening in terms of diversity and inclusion in a business. Because some of those lessons that we learn along the way are very painful and take time. So how can we fast track some of the things that we figure out after having worked for 6 months with someone, and fast track that into the start of an engagement? So at the moment, I am part of an organization called Aphoria Partners, and we build products and assessments and tools that support coaches and advisors all across the world. So the Enneagram is my passion. I see not many people here in this group are familiar with it, but there are many other tools I've worked with. I've worked with most of the things that are on the screen there. I've definitely started my career working with MBTI and 15FQ and OPQs and things like that, and have gradually moved towards what adds most value for me, at least, which is the Enneagram. I'm not going to teach you the Enneagram today. We're going to talk more generally about personality traits.
Okay,
but hopefully I pique some insight.
So we jump into that, sort
Yeah.
of. So we can use different tools, and people have preferences for tools, sort of that's suitable to them, and that's all fine, sort of. But the principles are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I started here with maybe where my career in trying to understand the human condition started, and that was as a kid, reading these books, the Mr. Men books and Little Miss books. I don't know if anyone else in the audience ever came across them, but they really spoke about personality traits of humans in kind of a fun way, and was part of my education even as I was growing up. The key thing, if we look at this question, how can we understand our clients, the people that we work with, is I think it's incredibly important to make one distinction, and that's the distinction between traits or personality and states, emotions. And I do think sometimes we confuse these two things. So when you're sitting with someone, and Carl, if you can just move the slides along, please. Sometimes if you're sitting with an advisor, you might find them, or a business owner, you might find them in the moment getting incredibly upset about something or excited about something. But that's just a moment in time. And that would be an emotional state. It's often triggered by the conversation, what's happening in the conversation, the way in which the conversation is happening. Now, I'm not going to talk so much today about how we manage those moments in time for people, because all of us go through all of these emotions while we're running our businesses and consulting our clients. I want to talk about something that's a bit more enduring, a personality trait, and how to understand those things. So this is something you get to know over time as the character of a person. So for example, if you've worked with a business owner for 6 months, after a while, you figure out, wow, this person is really conflict averse. Like whatever we do, if they have to have tough conversations, they wriggle their way out of it. And it has nothing to do with the emotion in the moment. This is really a character trait. Or this person really becomes aggressive. Or this person is really passive, for example. Now, the first thing, if you are able to identify the traits of some of your clients, and of course yourself, because this is a two-way street. You also have a personality that shows up in the room. You can start managing what works, what ways of working, get you results, and help you to get information in, help you to support the client to make decisions, and which of these throw up roadblocks. And which of these also throw up roadblocks for you, given your own personality traits. Now, if we look at the next slide, I mean, really, personality traits, we can go into a long list of different traits. Not all of them equally helpful. Some people are conscientious. Some people are very reactive or defensive. Some people are kind and empathic. Some people are aggressive. Some people are pessimistic. Some people are optimistic. So there are lots of common traits that we can look at. The list is very, very, very long. So this is where I think using a profiling tool or having some kind of framework to help you clump some of these traits together, introversion, extroversion being also, for example, one of them, helps you make sense of the smorgasbord, the long list of human traits that can be in frame. Now, as I mentioned before, the framework that I use, which is on the next slide, is the Enneagram. And I'm literally not going to spend any more time on it, just show you this. But what it does is it clumps together personality traits into 9 different categories. Those that are more passive and conflict-averse are called the Enneagram 9s. Those that are more perfectionistic and controlled are called the Enneagram 1s. And it helps you figure out the human condition in more of an integrated way than looking at separate character traits, which is why I find it really useful to work with. Now, the first trait I want us to work with today, on the next slide, Carl, is, oh, sorry, before we do that, I wanted to give you some guidelines for working with personality traits. So the first guideline that I want to offer you, if we can keep scrolling along, Carl, that's great. The first one is that when you are in relationship with a business owner, you may be there to talk about their business, but everything you do goes through your client. If they don't like the way it's going, even if you have the best advice in the world, it might not get implemented. It might not land. So you have to learn how to work with a person, the client, and be client-centric, not just to focus on technical speciality and expertise if you wanted to have real impact. The next guideline in terms of working with the traits is whatever happens there, don't take it personally and get reactive. Now, this is sometimes easier said than done, but keep in mind, personality traits are formed through a combination of our genetics and our upbringing. So by the time you're sitting with a 50-year-old business owner, that trait has been practiced for 50 years. It's not you making them an aggressive person, and they are like this everywhere and with lots of people. So you need to figure out how to work with them and walk next to them rather than thinking they're doing this to me and then getting caught up in a reactive game. The third guideline in terms of working with this is that it's incredibly important when disruptive parts of a personality comes into the conversation to affirm that they are normal and that what they're experiencing is normal, and to flow with some of it rather than to fight it. So if you have an aggressive client in front of you and you're trying to turn them into being kind and nice and caring, it's going to derail you. But if you figure out, how do I flow with this energy that I always get from this client, you can get more done. The fourth guideline is to ask yourself, not who are they, but who do I need to be? How do I need to communicate for them to be able to hear me? Some people hear details, some people don't. Some people hear you when you talk in positive tone. Some people don't hear positive tone, they only hear risk. So you need to also figure out how you need to adapt your style of communication so that your client can hear you. The fifth guideline is, Coral, thank you, is what is the limit to how much you should adapt? When do you become complicit? So now you're kind of going along with their things and you becoming part of the problem in their business. And that will affect the quality of your advice. So if you're flowing with them too much, sometimes you become part of the problem. And then lastly, the guideline is the more you get people to be in their rational part of their brain, this is called the prefrontal cortex, where they can analyze information in a logical, sequential manner by asking questions and out of being activated in some way into their personality traits, the more helpful the conversation becomes. So when someone's active in and kind of emotional in some kind of way, you want to get them back into the rational. And one of the ways to do this is to ask them to give you information. So we'll play with that in the role play. So just very briefly, and we can get back to that in the Q&A section, but I'd like us to look at a couple of the traits that we find. The first trait that I often come across is over-optimistic clients. They need business advice because they're ignoring and minimizing problems a lot of the time. They're over-optimistic about how quickly things are going to get better in COVID-19 in the pandemic. Don't worry, next week will be better. We're soon back to normal. They often spend money quite easily because if your frame is everything is great, then surely tomorrow's cash will take care of today's problems and spending. They often struggle to discern between ideas. So every idea is a possibility. Every idea is great. And so it becomes soon that we're doing 17 things at once to try and turn things around. When you speak to them, you can listen to them. They often say that things are nicer and better than they actually are when you actually look at the numbers and what's happening in the business. And they will stop returning your calls if the conversations get very painful. So if we're now dealing with where the rubber hits the road, all of a sudden, oh, they're offline and they've disappeared. Now, if you're working with these kinds of clients, and Coral, you can put both the next blocks on for me. Just two things. What should we do? What should we not do? The first thing is, if you try and overcorrect their optimism by being all doom and gloom, they're going to run away because you're not seeing possibility. So you have to find a way to bring realism in, but also to, in some way, affirm some of the positive views that they have. So this is where something like scenario planning becomes really important, because then you can work with, here's the rosy picture and here's the less rosy picture, and both of these possibilities may play out. So in some way, you're not complicit with them, but you're working alongside them. Also be very careful of your language. If you start going to yes, but, so every time they say, this is going to be great, and then you say, yes, but think about the pandemic. You have to say yes, and. The but is like a roadblock for these optimistic people. And if you start being a yes, but person, you become the enemy, one of those negative ones. And even if you're talking about really awful things, try to remain positive, keep smiling. It's like interesting cues that their brains interpret. The next one that we'll just look at very briefly is a passive and conflict-averse clients. So these are people who say, yes, of course I'm going to go and do it, and then they don't. Just nothing happens. And they're very nice to work with, but it seems like nothing gets going. And they say, yes, I'm going to work on the marketing plan, which is our first priority. And then they go and they rearrange the stock room. So in some kind of way, there's like, just get busy with non-essential activities. They say they'll get back to you. They don't call you. And they ignore you rather than fight with you. Now, if we deal with these clients, one or two things that's useful to do or to not do in our next two blocks. The worst thing you can do as an advisor is to get pushy with them, or to start getting aggressive with them and try and force them. The interesting thing is, a lot of these passive people grew up in situations with lots of conflict. And so the moment it sounds like you're fighting with them, they go into shutdown mode. So you actually have to listen to them and slow down the process rather than speed it up. And ask them questions. They want to be heard, but they're not going to start the conversation. And if it gets really bad, gently hold up the mirror and say, look, we've spoken about this marketing plan 3 times, and we're not moving forward. What's holding you back? This is the kind of tone that works with these kind of people. If you start pushing them and saying, look, do it now, they're not going to continue to enjoy working with you. Then the third trait that we look at is aggressive clients. I'm sure many of you have worked with aggressive clients. It seems like you're being lashed out. It's not as if you caused the bank to start taking COVID repayment loans, but somehow it's your problem, even though you have nothing to do with any of the big banks. They take over the agenda. They don't listen. They challenge your advice all the time. And you listen to their language, it sounds like they're in a war zone all the time. Are you for me or against me? This one's coming in and they're thwarting my plans and I'm going to go and kill them. Metaphorically speaking, is kind of what's happening here. Now, when you're working with aggressive clients, a couple of ideas of do's and don'ts. The first important thing is, as an advisor, do not become a zebra. Now, what do lions do to zebras? Lions eat zebras. And zebras here is if you become a pushover, if you allow yourself to be bullied and pushed around in many different ways, if you're too nice. And at the same time, you don't want to get into a battle with them. So what you want to do with your aggressive clients is show and tell them that you are on their side. They need to find that you're in the battle on the same side of the war, instead of being someone weak out there that should be eaten like a zebra, or someone that's on the opposing side, that's in some way trying to thwart their ideas. So you have to be strong and firm and stand by your inputs, but you have to also acknowledge theirs and continuously say, How can I support you? We're on the same side. And it helps you to remember that these aggressive clients are often quite vulnerable on the inside. They like marshmallows on the inside. And if you can see that there's a marshmallow on the inside, then you don't have to take all the aggressive stuff so personally. Last one, and this will get us into our role play that Thobeka and I will be doing. And this is when you are working with clients that are very doubting and cautious in some kind of way. So these are clients that ask lots and lots of questions. They invite you to come and give them advice. And then when you get there, they say, I'm not sure why you're here. It sounded like a good idea, but maybe not today. It's not a good time. So they're kind of tentatively in and out all the time. You give them some advice, then they go and check it with 15 other people, from their aunties to their uncles, to their best friends, to someone who has a business next door. Can I trust this advice or not? They take ages to make decisions. And sometimes it feels to you like you're taking 2 steps forward and then they question it all over again and you're 3 steps back. So how do you deal with these doubting and cautious clients? The worst thing you can do is to tell them stop worrying. Because if you tell them stop worrying, they worry more. They want you to also tell them that you're concerned, these are the risks you're taking care of. It's really helpful, and Carl, if you can put the next 2 blocks on there for us, it's really helpful for you to give them multiple options when you're advising them. Don't push them for quick decisions. Don't give them one option only. Say, we can do the marketing plan in this way or in that way. We can do some customer reviews in this way or that way. And the key thing to know is they're checking if they can trust you. So if you promise them stuff and then you don't deliver, you get into really serious trouble. Then they're going to lose trust in you and become more questioning, and the process will slow down further. So the next block, if we can put that on, the things that do work: multiple options, tell them how you're mitigating risks, ask them about their concerns, get them to express their ideas, and affirm that you're also helping them to keep bad things from happening. But because this is generally what these cautious, doubting clients are thinking, is they're thinking bad things will happen here. So I need to in some way prepare or make sure that these things don't happen. Be very patient, answer their questions, give them information. If you block their request for information, once again, that trust thing gets broken. So normally with these clients, work really, really hard on creating trust. So that gives us a starting point. I think there's another question and a poll that we want to look at. Which of the traits do you find hard to work with, that trigger you, or that make you feel less competent in some kind of way?
Yeah, that's where we're heading now, Lucille. So same story there as just now. You know, there will be the poll window that opens, and on your phone you can swipe to that, and then you can vote which of those are the ones that you encounter most, and that's the hardest to work with, perhaps. Aggression, over optimism, passivity, or doubt. And I see that Mahadi already posted the question there: how do I deal with a client who continuously sabotage himself? So which one of those are of sabotaging, Lucille?
Well, sabotaging can happen in a multitude of ways. So maybe it's useful to give us just an example of how they sabotage themselves. And then we can talk about that more. I mean, this is the sad thing. A lot of us do this. This is somehow how our programming that we get from childhood in somehow impacts on the way in which we do things in our adult lives in an unconscious way. Often self-sabotage is unconscious.
So maybe we can bring Mahadi in at the last bit of our discussion when we unpack things a bit. And I see Ndanduleni also posted a question there already. We'll come to those just now. So by the way, remember to click the Q&A button and then post your questions there. Then we will definitely be able to attend to them. They may get lost in the text chat. So let's look at the results of our poll first before we move on to. I wanted to move on to the role play immediately. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah.
So aggression, about half of people are dealing with aggression as the main one, but then over optimism and passivity are also scoring strong.
Yeah.
Is that common, Lucille? aggression.
Absolutely. Especially if we look at 2020, we have to look at the current context. 2020 has pushed business owners to their limit in terms of stress and strain. And for many of us, a natural way of trying to cope with that stress is to go into a fight response. So even less aggressive clients are more aggressive in 2020. And it is something that's hard to work with because it triggers us so much. It can easily feel that your personality is aimed at me, and then I take it personally, and my prefrontal cortex stops working. So it definitely is something that's very hard. I must confess that I struggle with the over-optimistic lot because it feels like there's no way to get the information in. And that's some of that self-sabotage in some way. Like, really? No. December 2020 is not going to be the same as December 2019. It's not the same world anymore. You can't just keep believing that. So it is, for me, I struggle with over-optimism quite a lot.
Okay, great. So we've got a question, and if you can get your keyboard right, everyone in the room. Carl, if we can go to that slide on the question that we want in the text chat. So if you can note there in the text chat, sorry, while we go into the role play, sorry, so I'm getting ahead of myself here. While we go into the role play, if you can collect there your thoughts in the text chat so that we can kind of engage with the thoughts that you have for what you see. So the role play is going to be between Lucille and Thobeka, and Thobeka is going to play the role of a client. So put your acting shoes on, Thobeka. This is not, it's not necessarily Thobeka in real life. We don't know. So, yeah, so so look there for the way in which the advisor responds. So this is Lucille, to the doubt and the reluctance of the client to get the conversation back on track. Okay, and how do you how do they get the conversation back on track? So what we'll see is things go a bit wrong, and then things may start going right. So what helped them in getting the conversation then back on track?
Right.
Is that right? Is that the right way of framing it?
Perfect. And I think the key thing here is please do not focus on any of the advice that's actually being given. This is not a role play in what advice to give to Thobeka. It's really how to deal with the different traits that we will see represented at different points in time. So in this role play, Thobeka has contacted me and asked me to come and see her about her business. She's in the business of doing training for entrepreneurs and establishing social entrepreneurship in different parts of Africa. And it's 2020 and things have been hard. So we'll see how that goes. Thobeka, it's really lovely to see you today. Thanks so much for inviting me to support you in terms of what's happening in your business at the moment. How are you doing today?
Hi, Lucille. Thank you. I'm all right. Yeah, I'm okay.
So you reached out to me because you've had a really hard time in your business over the last 8 months since COVID hit us. Tell me a little bit more about what's going on for you and what you'd like us to be solving for here today. What's up?
It's okay. It's fine. It's life, right? I don't have much. Yeah, it's just, yeah. It's fine.
I can hear that you're quite despondent today. When you sent that email to me, you were quite clear that you're ready to work on in some way pivoting your business, changing some of the ways that you're working, and then you needed support. And I see that today it feels like there's a bit of low energy going on here.
Lucille, yeah, no, it's fine. I think I was probably just having a moment. Really, it's fine. Yeah. Everything's just frustrating. It's fine. I mean, it's okay. Sorry for wasting your time, really.
Yeah. Well, we're both here, and let's just work with what's in the room, with some of the frustration, and even if some of that impulse has shifted, let's just see what's going on and make the most of this opportunity that we have to at least explore things together. I mean, as you know, there's no strings attached to this, so we can talk together, and if it's not working for you, we don't have to continue.
Lucille, you know, you can't imagine how frustrating it is. You know, government and organizations say, hey, we have a relief fund, and we use the relief fund because we are stressed. And then suddenly, now we've moved from level 5, 4, 3, and then suddenly at 2, the bank just deducts money. Like, how's that even possible? So right now, I'm just frustrated, and I don't know if this is what I need right now.
Well, I can hear that there's a real challenge in that you're quite angry about the way in which things are happening from the bank side, but it sounds like the main problem we need to solve for here is maybe the immediacy of cash flow. Is that something that's bothering you a lot?
Yeah.
So just give me the headline stuff. What's happened for you in the last while? What is the kind of cash flow that we need to support you to get back to in the business? What's the shortfall here? How much are the repayments that's happening from the COVID relief fund, etc.? Just give me the numbers.
Well, somehow I need to pay my rent. I need to pay my internet. Internet is important. Your phone, you can't get rid of those. Those are important. That's part of my business. You know, obviously I have a car, and food. You know, I have responsibilities. And then suddenly now I have this new deduction that wouldn't have been there immediately, you know. And it's like, I'm like in debt for like, geez, it's just too much. It's actually embarrassing, you know. About 60,000 and more, give or take. Yeah.
Okay. So there we've got a number. So we've got a number on the table. That's something we can solve for. So the first thing I want us to just think about, now I know your business from the chats we had before COVID-19 hit was very much focused on having to travel to clients, doing training with them, being on the scene. And obviously 2020 has changed that a lot. So I'm wondering, in this time that we've had this year, what are some of the new skills that you've developed, or some of the things that you've tried that you think might hold possibility for you to help pivot the way in which you do the business?
Well, of course, when lockdown started, I was stuck at home. I was depressed. And then a client contacted me, and I had an opportunity to, you know, kind of, you know, learn to do some of the stuff online, you know, kind of back to maneuver and navigate, you know, Zoom and other platforms as well. So, you know, and I mean, it was hard, but it's the thing that woke me up, even though I didn't get paid for it, because of course they also didn't have money, but you know, I went with it. So yeah, I have some online training that I have. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just start by banking that, right? What you have got that you didn't have before is the skill set that helps you run your training programs online. Yeah. So that you've done. And in terms of any possibilities, what have you done in terms of your marketing to put some of these ideas out there? Do your clients know that you can deliver in alternative platforms? What's happening on your website?
Yeah, my website needs a lot of work. Yeah. I haven't updated that. No.
Yeah. Okay. So we're just going to stop the role play here. Thank you so much, Thobeka. And the purpose of this was really to show a client that didn't want to be in the conversation anymore and how you get them back in there.
It was so interesting to observe. Thanks, Thobeka. I think you're the bravest one in the room today. But isn't it interesting when you put yourself in your client's shoes, sometimes what happens, eh? Sort of, so we have the conversation from the other side. So that would be an interesting thing, you know, sort of maybe we can do it more often to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person. So Ian says that he wants to see you on TV. So Thobeka, maybe you've got a different career to consider. Maybe the coaching should be in a different direction altogether. Great. So maybe can we ask Thobeka quickly, you know, sort of how that felt, being in the other shoes?
Oh, sure. Um, it's very interesting because it felt very, very vulnerable. Um, um, it was very interesting too, because you have some of those clients. I've experienced some of that where it's just like the realities are just there, and it's really difficult to find a way to move it from that stress and aggression and reluctance, possibly, and whatever feelings that came to me, and just annoyance, to yeah, it was interesting how we just moved. So it was interesting for me to go through that, but it's difficult because suddenly you have to open yourself up. It can be very embarrassing as well, and just trying to figure things out and just being lost. Yeah.
Okay, great. So
And
we
being
do have some
patient.
comments. We
And
do have some
Lucille was
comments to
great.
discuss. Sort of, Paul, please, sort of. So for you that haven't met Paul, Paul is the MD, the new MD of IBASA. Sort of if there are new people joining us, and Paul's joined us for a few webinars already. So Paul, please feel free to also contribute as much as you like. So Mahadi was saying, great role play. I admire the high level of perception. I suppose that's from Lucille's side. So, sort of even if Lucille was talking, it was happening up there. She had to kind of work through what was coming up. And then the client to actually communicate and identify the problem, sort of. So, Lucille, if you reflect back on that, sort of, is that accurate
Yeah.
observation?
So what I'm doing when I'm listening to clients, so obviously there's the content level, but I'm listening at the level of what's going on underneath that for the client all the time. And amazing things happen when you affirm in some way what they are experiencing and what they're bringing to the table. If you start saying, I can understand that you have run out of energy here. I can understand that you're frustrated. This is a normal response to the current circumstances. Instead of making the client in some way wrong. So you affirm them for where they're at. And then you just want to get them to, as time, you don't rush it, but at some point you start just asking a couple of more rational questions. And then, of course, you could deal with the shame of the debt or whatever. And it's just like, just keep saying to them, it's so great that you can talk about it. Now we can manage it. Once you can put it on the table, we can work with it. So it's really important to not just listen to the content, but also listen to what's going on for the person.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's great.
So Diane calls it active listening.
Absolutely. It's coaching skills. It's basic active listening coaching skills. It's about asking questions and hearing where the client's at. What did you see, Mpho?
I think personally, I can relate to everything that you've just shared, because currently with the information or some of the frustrations that I'm getting from our IBASA members, I have to really try to play those different roles and say, you know what, am I dealing with an aggressive person who's saying, you know what, I've had enough, I don't want any stories, get to the point. But everything that, all the traits that you have highlighted, I can safely say within a short space of time I've been within the four walls of IBASA, I have experienced them from different clients. And it's so important, as you say, to listen the underlying tone of every client, because once you put yourself in their shoes, then you're able to travel the journey and come up with a solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
So were you conscious? Were you conscious about how Thobeka was showing up? Sort of, if you can just maybe unpack that. Sort of. For us, you gave us the framework of people show up in the world in different ways, and if you understand them better, you can engage with them better.
Yeah, so she was showing up with a lot of doubt and reluctance. So this is the person who some way finds themselves in trouble, and then reaches out to someone with authority or with specialist skills that seem to help them. But the moment those people show up, they think, I've made a mistake. Why am I here? And kind of very reluctant and cautious to share information, to put things forward. So that would be more of the doubting, cautious client. And you'll see that the core thing there is to keep asking questions and keep affirming them as a way of showing that you are trustworthy in some kind of way. That was part of what we saw there. These kinds of clients, and I think it's Richard's question in the Q&A. He says, can you get a combination of personalities? And that's absolutely true. Someone can go from being doubting to then under pressure when they feel a bit of stress, for example, being incredibly aggressive. This is normally what we call the stress adaptation. So I'm optimistic a lot of the time, and then I become quite negative when the stress gets to me. So there are these kind of almost swings that we have in traits that can be confusing to work with. But normally when you experience a swing of traits like that, it's because of pressure and stress getting the better of them, or sometimes also because they're finally relaxing after a long period of stress. So that is part of what we saw with Thobeka. She went from being doubting and cautious to then slowly starting to get into flow with more of the information and opening up and sharing things that were hard to share in some way.
Great.
And I also liked what you did when you were trying to sort of bring the pre-COVID, situation into the conversation, because some of us, as much as we are faced with this crisis, the challenges that we are, the mounting challenges that we are currently experiencing at this moment might have emanated from some of the previous mistakes that we have done. So it's so important that in the midst of all this confusion or all this frustration, we allow ourselves to take a moment of reflection and say, yes, there are other people who have made my situation worse, but I cannot remove myself from the bigger picture. What role did I play, and how do I rectify the situation going forward with the circumstances that I'm faced with?
So we've got Tabi Zikalala attendee. You've raised your hand. The punishment for raising your hand is you have to speak. So Tabi, what did you observe?
I didn't raise my hand, but anyway, I'll still comment. Okay, so what I observed is between Thobeka and Lucille. Actually, I saw how Lucille was actually listening to Thobeka. She was actually listening, and what she did, she was empathic. There was no judgment. She brought Thobeka in the way, in her empathy, she allowed Thobeka to express her feeling. Not only that, but also come out of that funk, that I'm going to use the word funk, that she was in when she came in. Remember, when she came in, she was like, I don't know why I'm here. But the way Lucille approached that whole thing was, she came back and was willing to talk about what she brought up. She was willing to be vulnerable. So that's what I observed.
Great, thanks, Tabi. So if there's anyone else that want to make any observations, you can raise your hand. We'll bring you in. You can talk. I see Maurice's observation there. Sort of in the things that emerged for her in the role play around skill and moving to alternatives. Identifying alternatives. So you were conscious in actually offering that to Thobeka. Sort of you may be looking this way, but there's something else to look at that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I find that it's very helpful, especially if we look at 2020, to help people find some things that can boost our self-esteem despite how hard this year has been. And it can be simple things, but I can start getting into a proactive space and a positive space to problem solve if I can remember that I have built new skills, for example, or that I have already been able to do something, even though it wasn't necessarily bringing the money that I needed, but just in some ways getting people to a place where they affirm themselves. As part of what's bringing up some of our less productive behaviors at this point in time is the fact that we're not getting the self-esteem points that we normally get from running our businesses successfully. So every time I make a sale, every time I close a deal, there's a little boost of self-esteem that keeps telling me I'm okay as a business owner. And 2020, we've had very little of those boosts to our self-esteem. And that means that many people are needing to remind themselves or find things to feel slightly good about, despite the doom and gloom, so that I can get into problem-solving mode rather than just being stuck in how terrible and how bad and impossible everything is.
Great. So there are questions about the slides and recording. So it will be on IBASA's website. There's a blog post, by the way, too, that Carl will do for us. diligently so, so if you haven't looked, by the way, if you're attending the webinars for a while and you didn't notice the blog post there, it's really a good resource, sort of to refer back to. The recording of the event is there too, and so on. So, sort of you can rehash things there if you think you've missed something. But let's attend to a few more questions that we have. Sort of there aren't many. So if you want to add a question or raise your hand to speak, you can do so. We'll allow you in. So some clients, Mina says, it's not working out at all. Is it okay for the client to fire you?
I think sometimes we can actually be at our most helpful when we fire ourselves from some client engagements as well. So I think there is no such thing as a marriage forever in the advisory world. You have chemistry with certain clients, and with some clients you just don't. And if you're getting them into a worse space through the lack of chemistry between the two of you, it's okay to say, look, I think I'm not the best person to support you here. When we fire ourselves from clients, it's useful to point people in other directions so we don't abandon them completely, because abandonment is something that can trigger a whole new set of problems. But to say, what do you think? Is this working for you? Because if it isn't, let's part ways and I can point you in a more helpful direction.
Yeah, Thobeka, does that resonate with you as the client in this case?
Yeah.
But in any case, sort of, so it's the spark between the support person supporting others. There needs to be a connection. If there's no connection, it can't be a sterile relationship. So the Moraka, Lucille, is steering us towards perhaps part of this about where our competencies lie and what we can in fact support people in, and sort of in identifying these different options. It may not be within our competencies to be supporting someone in that. So how would such a discussion go? Sort of, so you identified certain alternative for it, spoke about the platform, taking it to different clients and so on. So you had knowledge about those things, but sometimes things we don't have knowledge of appear in the discussion.
Yeah. So for me, there's a difference between thinking about whether there is a competency mismatch or whether there is a kind of personality mismatch. And that's something to just be aware of. So I think part of our roles, if we want to be good advisors, is we need to learn how to work with all kinds of personalities. And yes, some people will always trigger us more because they remind us of, our grannies or something like that, and granny was scary. And we're always going to have to work harder in those kinds of relationships. But I think it would be hard for us to say, well, I don't work with those kinds of clients. I don't take aggressive clients. Because it's part of our role, if we want to be proper advisors, to learn how to also give them advice, because they also need our advice. It's a whole other kettle of fish when we talk about competency sets. So do I have the competency to help with this kind of problem or that kind of problem? There we have to absolutely be within our integrity and say, this is not my skill set. Let me find someone who can support you with that. But I don't think we should opt out of our own personal development just because the character traits of someone triggers us. That's our work, right? If we can become more mature as advisors, then we can also give better advice.
Yeah, we try to do it here amongst others, but there are also other places that people need to do that. So at Euphoria, you do different kinds of work with different clients of people and so on. So how do you guys make sure that you stay on top of your game?
So the first thing that we do is we believe in supervision. So supervision is a place where I go and talk to someone with who has an understanding of the kind of work that I do, and I go and unpack about the clients that have triggered me. So it's almost like therapy for the therapist, consulting for the consultant is the principle of supervision. And that makes a huge difference. Communities of practice like this one, where we can talk about things in a safe space, also obviously really, really supports. And then we need to continue our professional development. So if I know that I'm triggered by certain kinds of clients, I need to go and find people who can mentor me that seem to work well with those kinds of clients. There are many options for it. But I definitely believe that communities of practice and getting our own support as we support others is a starting point.
Kind of peer groups, and we can form them without, we can do it ourselves. We don't have to wait for anyone to organize it. You know, sort of.
Absolutely.
So check who's commented most in the text chat, and you invite them into your own peer group or something like that. Lucille, so the question about tools. So, you know, sort of, I know you've got your preference, and we've posted your website link there. People can go look there. But so if Ndandu Lenny is asking about, you know, sort of, so if someone comes in like really cold and, you know, sort of this is interesting. What is the next step for one to go and look at the different tools?
Well, I think the key thing is to do just a little bit of research to start off and say, you know, just look at, for example, Insights or MBTI or Enneagram. Just look at a couple of them and see, do any of these frameworks kind of immediately seem like it would be useful or nice for me to work with? Would this be relevant to the people I work with? And then once you've found a tool that can help you understand your clients better, you can do research. Many of these things, there are free tools available. So I know, you know, we have a specialized tool that's available for the Enneagram in isiXhosa, in Setswana, in Afrikaans, and in English to help people find the Enneagram style. But you can also find lots of free Enneagram tests in English on the web. Ours is a paid for test, and people trying to understand personality better. And similar systems exist for a lot of the different profiling tools. I can only say that when you learn more about a profiling tool like this properly, you also learn a lot more about yourself. And so it supports the quality of your advice off the bat. Even if you don't end up using the assessment, it also helps you understand yourself.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was mentioned, but we didn't kind of focus on that so much, you know, sort of, in fact, before you try to understand your client, understand yourself.
Yeah. It's a two-way street. If you don't know what triggers you, you're going to continue to be triggered by it. And then a lot of your power is given away in many different ways. I see Mahadi's asking about coach training. So coach training, if you want to learn how to ask coaching questions and open-ended questions, that's a very good way to go. And there are some places where you can do online coaching, starting courses, some of them very affordable. Some of the big business schools ask huge amounts of money for coaching training, and some of that's really good. But one of the local providers that I'd highly recommend that's affordable and does amazing work in this space is a coach school called Thoughtsmiths. And they have affordable coaching training that also supports the nonprofit sector and social entrepreneurial businesses. It's much more affordable and accessible than going to a business school. If you have that money, well done. You can go and get a formal master's in coaching. But it's also useful to just look out for webinars and podcasts on coaching that you can access for free, that give you some interesting tools and insights. Our website at aphoria.co.za has some podcasts around how do you work with depression and the absurdity of 2020 with coaching clients, existential coaching issues. You can go and look at lots of those free resources as well as a starting point if you're interested in that.
So kind of, we are over 60 people in the room here. If you have anyone in the room, if you have any sharing to do in terms of where to skill ourselves and improve ourselves, please type so in the text chat. It's welcomed. Mahadi says thanks for that, Lucille.
I know
anyone that's got some, you know, sort of in terms of where to go, please share. We want to know and learn and find the right places.
I know that the Get Smarter platform of UCT also have some really nice starting out courses that you can do online on coaching skills that I would also recommend, and is also more accessible and affordable.
Great. So, I mean, the hour's up, eh? It was quick. So let's end the discussion. We're going to go over to talking, giving Paul just kind of a quick chance to talk about IBASA membership and so on, because all of us in the room aren't IBASA members and we're getting the benefit of this. So maybe there is something to work on there for ourselves too. Those that are IBASA members, you know, sort of remember to look out for that email and record your CPD time too, because that's important as well. And then we ask, in the text chat there's a little form that we ask you. And I ask that please click on that link now, the one that Carl just, as Zoom administrator, pasted, the feedback form. It is really important. It helps us. It helps EPI and IBASA in planning the future events. And it brings us, sort of helps us to bring you what you need. So just click on that link, open the form. It's quick. It's a minute of your time, but it really helps. So if you've not done so, please click on that link in the text chat, and it will take you to a quick Google form that you can give us some feedback. So Lucille, don't run away yet. And Thobeka, we want to ask you what you take away yourselves from this discussion before we hand over to Paul. Thobeka, if you can come back to, please. So let's start, Thobeka. Let's start with you. Or did you disappear now? There you are.
Hi, yes, sorry about that. My takeaway is just being able to listen a lot. I think can't reiterate that, and really listen, fully listen to the person. So like what Lucille shared is going with the flow of what the person is, where the person's taking you, but being giving feedback, in being loving and kind and being there and positive and make the person feel comfortable. That's my take away from that. Not to be nice, but to be kind.
So Paul, we were fortunate. We didn't sweat as an actor today, but we could observe. What is your takeaway?
I'm also taking the whole issue of the importance of listening, as I've mentioned. That's one. And also the whole issue of, in each and every situation, it's easy to be the victim, but at the same time, try to take a moment and say, yes, we are in this situation. I find myself in this situation. What was my role in getting to the situation? Because once you engage with your advisor and accept some of the things or contributions that you have made towards getting into this difficult position, it will be easier for both of you to work out a possible way forward. But all that takes place when both of you can listen to both the spoken and the unspoken words, like what Thobeka was doing, the puffing and huffing, but Lucille was very patient in the process.
Great. And before we get to Lucille, Carl, if you can switch your camera on. So, Carl may be pushing the buttons in the background today, but he's a business advisor with 25 years experience, sort of odd. Maybe it's 27 by now, Carl. I don't know. You gained 2 years in the last. So what's your observation in terms of what we've done today?
Yeah, I think, and then that's maybe a personal observation. I think women are firstly more naturally skilled to be coaches, because this is definitely out of my comfort zone to try and get into that personal, emotional space and understanding. We want to go to the problem and the solution quickly. And clearly what I got out of this again is if I can't connect to the person, there's no way I can take them forward in any way. So I think earlier reference also is I need to understand who I am, how I'm coming there, and otherwise I'll just have no positive effect or constructive effect in the engagement. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, great. So Lucille, you may have the last word then.
The last word would just be this big feeling that I get from looking at the wonderful comments that people are putting there and the questions. I get how much care there is in this group for your clients. And I just want to affirm all of you for caring. And to say to all of you, and this is true not just for our clients, but for ourselves as well, that 2020 has been hard. And it is really a year that requires us to also be kind to ourselves in many different ways. And we have never in the world seen as many mental health problems and as high stress levels in the last number of years as we have at the moment. So there's a worsening trend on mental health. And we need to take that into consideration because we're going to be working with clients that are more stressed and in worse shape than you found them a year ago.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the stress that we experience ourselves. I think that's kind of what I was thinking too. Great, thank you very much. We did a bit of an experiment today. I think it worked well, sort of to do the role play. It really makes it practical and engaging. I hope everyone else enjoyed it. Can you give us a thumbs up if you liked it? Did you like it? Yes, no, in the chat. Kenton says a great session. Mina says yes. We take your guidance, guys. So yes. Can you say you can say no to if you don't like it. If you just want bullet points to be delivered, we'll bring that to you. Thanks, guys, and for sharing some other tips there in terms of access to this. If you page back now, sort of you'll see in the text chat there's some other tips in terms of where we could go for empowering ourselves, improving ourselves. Great. Well, good response there. Great stuff. So let's move over to IBASA. Paul, we can talk about membership and so on. So over to you.
Thank you, Christoph. I know we have a slide that we want to touch on in terms of how to become an IBASA member, but I don't really want to preach a lot about that. I think I just wanted to highlight to the members that they can access the information on our website in terms of how to become an IBASA member. And I'm also availing myself from a contact person because I know that it has been challenging for our members to get hold of us. In the next few days or so, we'll also be putting up some mobile numbers that members can utilize in order to engage with us, especially when we are experiencing power failures, because when there's power failures, landlines also go haywire. So it will be easy for them to access us in multiple platforms. So you can engage with me via md@ibasa.org.za. And I also want to highlight something about the whole issue of membership. I'll encourage everyone to be an IBASA member. But the key thing is that most members are asking themselves at this stage, Christoph, is what is the benefit of being an IBASA member? One of the things that one is currently working on is building a benefit pack for our members. They have to derive value. There has to be something that members are taking from being certified IBASA members, and I've realized that since I joined, we were lacking in that space, and it's critical that we highlight to our members at this very moment that they'll be getting some membership value adds highlighted as to why they should become a member of IBASA and be registered with IBASA, and also some discounts. We want to encourage renewal of membership. So if someone is renewing their membership earlier, definitely there'll be some rebates and rewards aligned to that. And also the whole issue of our members being part of the project, the projects that we are engaged in. I want to see IBASA member being part of the project from a provincial perspective, at a national perspective, and at an international perspective. And we profile our members in terms of the success of their involvement in those projects. And this is something that I've seen has been lacking and we have not been doing. And it's part of the activities that will be coming in future to make sure that people or our members derive value for being accredited and being members of IBASA. The other thing is to have the introduction of continuous skills and knowledge gap analysis. We want to make sure that at least we do some analysis of our members who have been with us for years, do some gap analysis to see where they are currently, and also make sure that the programs, the short courses or the skills programs that we're introducing, or CPD programs that we're introducing, are properly aligned to the gap analysis that we have identified. We have not been doing that actively. We do it, but not as intense as it should be. So we're increasing the frequency of those of that aspect. And also another thing that we'll be introducing as in the future is the online assessment, which will also form part of our whole improvement from an assessment perspective. So then they can do annual online assessment, which some other organization will introduce as board exams, but we want to bring that to an online platform that our members can really benefit from. And more activities that both business advisors can really relate or engage on with the SMMEs. It's not just, I know currently we're dealing with business advisors, but I can safely say today, I know some of the SMMEs who are participating in this session. So as a client, you should be able to get some value from the platforms that IBASA have. So we'll also be having sessions that are aligned to specifically clients. And also sessions that incorporate both clients and business advisors so that they can embrace each other and understand the dynamics and opportunities that are there in the field that they're operating within. So in a nutshell, there are a lot of things that we want to introduce to make sure that there's a value derived by members from being a certified IBASA member. So those are the things that will be coming forward, and I'll introduce them as we phase them out in the next few months.
Great, thank you very much, Paul, for that update. So we're looking forward to our next webinar. I'm now blank. Carl, can you remind me? Or Paul, can you remember what did we say is going to be about cash flow managing cash flow for your practice during difficult times, when the COVID strikes?
It's all post-COVID, during this COVID process, how do we manage cash flow issues, and also take into consideration that it's December time, how do we deal with that? We are still dealing with the COVID issue and experiencing cash flow challenges. And we know it has been the tradition in the past, during the festive season, we spend our hard-earned money. But as we said, this year it's different.
Yeah. Great. So thanks again, Lucille. We kicked your camera off, so I'm not sure if you can switch it on again, but in your absence, thank you very much. And Thobeka for being brave. And Paul, thanks for sharing that too. So see you next month in December. Register, please, so that you can attend and keep building your capacity. So this is a bit more kind of, call it a sterile subject, if I may call it, but as important, so, and that's, I think, the challenge that we are facing and that we can address by empowering ourselves. So move from the numbers to the traits, and understand both, and then we can serve our customers best. So looking forward to see you guys next month. Thank you very much for the participation, Tali, for coming in to talk to us too as a live attendee, so to speak, and everyone else that commented and posted your questions. So have a good Thursday, and hope the rush of the end of the year doesn't get too much, but good luck with that too.
And be safe.
Yeah, stay safe.
Thank you.
Very important, stay safe.
Yeah.
Bye-bye,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye. Bye.